Jason Licht hasn't made a trade in the first round of the draft since moving up for Tristan Wirfs in 2020, but this might be the year that it's worth moving up and sacrificing draft capital in order to land a franchise-changing player on defense.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into this episode of Locked On Bucs, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. I'd like to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every day. I'm your host, James Yarcho, writer over at Bucs Report. I've covered the Buccaneers for over a decade, and I am here with you every Monday through Friday along with the everydayers, and for that, I want to share my appreciation for your continued support of the show. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Use your profit boost on an NBA future and get entered in for your chance to win a trip to the NBA Finals. Play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. We are going to talk about David Walker's return and what it could do for the Bucs, as well as a name that is starting to pick up steam among Bucs fans and some media in the NFL draft. But starting the day off with a question for all of you. Would you want Jason Licht to sacrifice draft capital in order to jump into the top 10 of this year's draft? Now, of course, this is all going to hinge on what he does in free agency, because maybe there won't be as much of a need to go up and get someone, or maybe they make a trade for a current player and they won't have that capital to give up. But I can tell you this with near certainty. There are a couple of players in this draft that it would be worth it to me to be aggressive and go get. I've mentioned a couple of times that there are only about 10 to 12 truly elite players in this draft. Jason has mentioned that they feel that there's more top-end talent at linebacker and edge rusher than there is along the defensive line, and maybe that's a reason that you don't make a trade. But this is a team that has the offense to win now and has to add truly elite difference makers on defense if they're going to hang with the big boys of the NFL. The Rams, the Seahawks, Kansas City, you assume, is going to bounce back. Baltimore, same thing. Buffalo, San Francisco, Detroit, you assume they're going to bounce back. And if you're going to add that kind of elite talent in this draft to have as basically like a future core piece and building block for your franchise, you're going to have to pay to go get it. Now, Jason, until recently, has been willing to wheel and deal in the draft to get his guy. He's traded up 9 times. He's traded down 4. But he has only moved up in the first round 1 time in his career, and that was to go get Tristan Wirfs. I would say that, I don't know, that worked out pretty well, don't you think? As a reminder, what did it cost for Jason to move up 1 spot and secure who is now regarded as one of the best left tackles in the game and the only player in NFL history to be an all-pro at left and right tackle? Well, the Bucs got picks 13 and 245 in exchange for picks 14 and 117. Jason Licht has also moved down in the first round 3 times. He got Vernon Hargreaves in 2016, a player that many of you who have followed me over the course of my career covering the Buccaneers would remember me saying that they should absolutely not take at all in the draft under any circumstances. And the pick that they traded out of was pick number 9, where Chicago took Leonard Floyd. Then getting Vita Vea in 2018 by moving back from 7 to 12. That 7th pick went to Buffalo, who took quarterback Josh Allen. And then in 2022, when they traded out of the first round with Jacksonville so that they could select Devin Lloyd, while the Bucs got the first pick in the second round where they took Logan Hall. Moral of the story is that when Jason gets aggressive and moves up, they wind up with a Pro Bowler and All-Pro. When they trade down in the first, the team that they trade with ends up with a Pro Bowler and All-Pro, while the Bucs end up with a bust, a Pro Bowler, and a decent but not special starter. All of that said, who is a player worth moving up for in this draft and someone that can change the face of your defense? You know, there's a couple you can get, but I'm talking about Sonny Styles, guys. You know, we've talked about him quite a few times over the course of the offseason now. I know some of you early on in the process wanted nothing to do with Sonny Styles. I know a lot of you were in love with the idea of drafting Sonny Styles. But I can tell you this, he is not making it to the Bucs at 15. And I have never been more convinced that these mock drafts that have that happening are just absolute pipe dreams. There was one that dropped Thursday night that still had Sonny Styles falling to the Bucs at 15. It's not happening. He is an absolute monster of a linebacker, and his combine interviews, measurables, and workouts, it's going to lock him into the top 10. It could move him into the top 5. So how far does Jason Licht need to move up the board in order to land him? Well, you have to jump Dallas for sure, but I think you need to get in front of New Orleans. I know there's a lot of talk about them being a likely landing spot for Jeremiah Love, but now there's talk about Jeremiah Love going in the top 5 to the Tennessee Titans. There's talk about him potentially landing with the Commanders. Jeremiah Love, yeah, he would fit in New Orleans for sure, but is he going to get there? And if he doesn't get there, Sonny Styles might. Styles in New Orleans makes a ton of sense, and he can anchor that defense for years. But either way, Jeremiah Love or Sonny Styles, it's going to be a nightmare for the Bucs to face either of them for the foreseeable future. Now, Styles could go as high as 4, despite the Jeremiah Love conversation, he could go as high as 4 to the Titans with them trading Sweat. They're going to look to take one of the elite defensive players. Now, that may mean an elite defensive lineman. It may mean Ruben Bain. If they can get past the arm length thing, I'll save that conversation for another day. But they need a ton of help. So they could very well just take whoever the best player is on the board, since they need upgrades literally everywhere. The Giants at number 5, they have some decent linebackers and may certainly consider Styles there for an upgrade, but their linebackers overall played pretty well last year. I think the sweet spot here is either Cleveland or Washington. That gets you ahead of the Saints and well ahead of Dallas. Now, I know what you're saying. James, it's an off-ball linebacker. You don't take them that high. Yeah, you do. People said the same thing about running back until teams started doing it and reaping the benefits of players like Jahmyr Gibbs and Bijan Robinson, and coming to an NFL field near you, Jeremiah Love. In order for the Bucs to move up into that range at 6 or 7, it's going to cost a lot. Now, if you use the Fitzgerald-Spielberger trade value chart over the cap, the Bucs would have to make up for almost 500 points to move up to pick number 6, and then 400 points to move up to pick number 7. That means the Bucs would have to give up 15 and 77. That's 2,427 points. And then the Bucs would get back 6 and 205, which is 2,394 points. You can count the remaining balance as the top 10 tax. That said, I don't think that the chart accurately reflects what it is really going to cost the Bucs to jump nearly 10 picks and go from the mid-teens to almost the top 5. A third rounder is not going to get the job done, and you certainly aren't going to get a pick back in return. So you're probably throwing in at least a day 2 pick in 2027 as well. Let's just call it a second. So now you're giving up 50% of your picks in the first 2 days over the next 2 years. So is it worth it for the Bucs to give up, one of their first 3 picks in exchange for a player, one of your first 3 picks this year and next year, in exchange for a player that plays an undervalued position, if it means that they're going to get someone that can have the level of impact that Levante David essentially has, over the course of the last 14 years for this team? I think it is. Not to mention, you're locking him in for 5 years at a very affordable price, to the point that you can still build around him on the defensive side of the ball. It does not preclude you from going out and getting a Mafe or an Owe or a Chubb or a Hendrickson. It just adds to the fierceness of that defense if you pack Sonny Styles on top of that. I don't think there's a lot of players that you do this for, but in this draft, with where the Bucs are at the moment, this is a move that I'm making calls about for sure. I'm trying to do whatever I can to jump in front of, again, at least Dallas, which if you're dealing with the Chiefs, the Bengals, the Dolphins, it's going to be much cheaper. But I truly believe you have to get in front of the Saints just to make sure. because they could very well take Sonny Styles over Jeremiah Love. I would rather give up the draft picks to make sure that Sonny Styles is on my team than have to game plan against him twice a year for the next decade. And shout out to my guy, Bailey Adams, over at Pewter Report. He brought up something that really makes a lot of sense. And Jason Licht, when he spoke with us in the local media scrum and then again at the podium, he talked about how he's not, opposed to making a big trade. If the player is right, if the fit is right, if the price is right, all of those things, if they mesh together, he will go do what it takes to secure that player. Now, in all of our minds, we're thinking, okay, Crosby, Herbig, maybe it's somebody like that. No, it could mean making sure that you are making a blockbuster trade to move up in the draft and secure a player like Styles for the middle of this defense for the next 10 plus years. What could the Bucs be getting in the return of David Walker, and will he immediately upgrade the pass rush? That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Wanted to experience the NBA Finals live and in person? FanDuel is giving you the chance to turn that dream into reality with their NBA sweepstakes. Here's how it works. Use your profit boost on any NBA future, and you'll automatically be entered for a shot to win an NBA Finals trip for two. That's right, flight, tickets, the whole experience. If you're already looking at the board and thinking about which team can make a deep run, this is the perfect time to lock in. I love futures this time of year, whether it's picking a team to win the NBA Finals or to grab a conference title. It adds an extra layer of excitement to every game down the stretch. I've already locked in the Boston Celtics winning the Eastern Conference because you have a great team already. Now you're going to get Jason Tatum back for the postseason? Get out of here. The Eastern Conference isn't ready for that. Now, not only can your pick cash, but it can also send you to the finals. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Use your profit boost on an NBA future and get entered for your chance to win a trip to the NBA Finals. Play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every day, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. If you haven't already, go check out the Everydayer Club, the all-access tier. There are exclusive perks, discount at the merch store, daily newsletter, all-access episodes. You'll just want to click the link in the show notes. All right, one of the topics of conversation that came up a lot when we were speaking with Jason and Todd was David Walker and what he could bring to the Bucs this season after missing his entire rookie year to that torn ACL. And here's what Jason had to say about Walker's status and return. Well, we are very excited about David Walker. Based on what we saw from him early last year and then Kalijah, we thought we had two along with Vita. We had some very good pressure players. Injuries put a wrench in some things last year. End quote. Here's the thing with Walker. There was a lot of optimism about him coming out in the draft. He fell to day 3, but he was a highly touted edge rusher, even though he was coming out of a smaller school, and we just never got to see that come to fruition. Now, I will say this. Do not, how can I phrase this? Don't bank on him to be super productive this season coming off of the ACL tear. I understand that all injuries and all recoveries are different because all people are different. But typically, there's a longer period after medical clearance before you're back to 100%. Now, to give you a couple of examples, we saw it with Chris Godwin. It was a full season after his ACL surgery before he looked to be 100% back to being Chris Godwin. Keeping it with the Bucs, you remember years and years ago, depending on how old you are, when Mark Dominic traded for Darrelle Revis. And in his one season with the Bucs, coming off of an ACL surgery, he was not the same lockdown corner that he had been with the Jets. Then he goes off to the Patriots the following year because Lovie Smith cut him and bounced back fully. He was back to being Hall of Famer Darrelle Revis. I witnessed it personally firsthand with my own kid. I had one of the other parents, real quick, on a little side note, had one of the other parents come up to me about a month and a half ago. And I had told him earlier in the year when we were sitting there watching practice, I was like, Beckett's not himself. He's not back yet. And so this dad told me, he goes, I thought you might have kind of been blowing some smoke, because let's be honest, all parents kind of inflate the abilities of their own kids. But then he told me, he goes, I see what you mean now. He's like an entirely different player. And it took him 5 months into the season before he started to look like himself again and regain that confidence. So when it comes to Walker, I think it's best that he's still going to have a limited role in the defense. Obviously, edge rusher is a need, and the Bucs are going to address it in some fashion this year, whether that's free agency, trade, or the draft. And they've spoken to a lot of edge rushers in Indianapolis. Light said that they really like the depth there, as well as linebacker. Those are the two positions he kept mentioning over and over, as there were a lot of guys that they really, really liked. So that could be the way that they attack that need, or they can go with the proven commodity in free agency. I just mentioned some: Chubb, Mafe, Owe, even Trey Hendrickson, somebody like that. Walker is going to be an asset on this team for sure. I said it in the pre-draft process that I really liked him. I said it when he was drafted. We started hearing buzz about him during the offseason workouts, and then he gets injured. But having a reduced and more rotational role is not only going to allow him to adapt to the speed of the game that he missed out on as a rookie, but it's going to allow him to kind of ramp up and get back to the physicality that he needs to have. Because even when he starts with the practices or the OTAs or anything like that, whatever that may be, according to Jason Licht, it sounds like he'll be ready for training camp, maybe even a little bit sooner, to do some lighter work in OTAs. But even when all of that starts, he's not going to be his normal self. This is going to take time. It's going to take reps. It's going to take continued rehab and physical therapy off the field. So there's no doubt that David Walker has his work cut out for him. The Bucs cannot and will not bank on him immediately returning to the form that he had when he was drafted and ask him to be a 50 or a 60% snap guy. But they're also not going to bank on him walking into his first season that he's able to play and think that he can immediately be a double-digit sack guy. If he is, great. That's awesome. But it's unlikely, highly unlikely, and it's not something that the Bucs can really afford to take a chance on. They have to get someone in here that's going to help transform this defense. And I know a lot of people are starting to think that this roster is too far away from competing, but I don't. You guys know I'm not going to blow smoke, towards you either. I'm always as honest as possible on the show. And I think with the right couple of guys, and then of course you need some luck to go your way in terms of injuries, which is a different way of saying they need the polar opposite of what happened last year. This is a team that can compete with everyone in the NFL. We know the spots: edge, linebacker, defensive line, tight end, running back, and then depth everywhere. Todd Bowles said that he wants depth everywhere, but we know the key positions that have to be addressed with guys that can perform, guys that can produce. The front seven of this defense is going to have the biggest impact on this team in 2026. Walker helps that for sure. I'm super excited that he is going to be back. Everyone should be excited about finally getting to see him hit the field. But he's not the solution to the problem. Not right now. What David Walker is the solution of how to not be put in a situation where you're forced to rely on Chris Braswell. You have Yaya. You need to bring in that other starter. Then in the rotation, you have Anthony Nelson, who has his moments where he shines like an absolute star. And then you have David Walker. If you're down to Chris Braswell, there's problems, and you're not getting that injury. That's what that means. But don't expect David Walker to come in and transform the defense. Coming off of an ACL tear that caused him to miss his rookie year, and he's getting his first NFL action while still trying to regain his full abilities. Some fans are starting to call for the Bucs to go offense with their first round pick again this year. That's coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs. Welcome to the 5-Hour Energy Flavor Draft. We are looking at every aspect of the draft to let you know which tasty flavors are the best and which just might be sleepers. The board is set, the flavors are ready, and only one is going to take the top spot. 5-Hour Energy has a wide variety of flavors, which means there's definitely something for everyone, and they give you a boost with zero sugar. That's so important. My go-to has always been the berry. It's slightly sweet, but it gives you that classic mixed berry taste that always hits the spot, never goes out of season. But I have recently become a huge fan of strawberry watermelon. Those are my two favorite fruits. And if there were ever two flavors that were meant to be mixed together, it's strawberry and watermelon. So berry came in as the 101 leader in the clubhouse, but strawberry watermelon is making a big push in the final days to become that shocking pick at the top spot. Find your new favorite flavor of 5-Hour Energy shots available online at 5hourenergy.com or Amazon. Wrapping things up here on today's episode of Locked On Bucs. All right, okay. I've seen this starting to float around Twitter. I've had a couple of everydayers actually text me about this. I had a couple of people message the Locked On Bucs account on Facebook. And for those of you that do that, I apologize. I haven't been getting notifications. So when I remember, I'll go to check and I try to catch up. So if you message me over there, be patient. I'm not ignoring you. I just don't always check that account. But yes, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers had a formal meeting with Kenyon Sadiq, the tight end out of Oregon, at the Combine. Yes, the Bucs need to upgrade their tight end room. Yes, Cade Otton is more than likely gone. And yes, Sadiq was a dominant player at Oregon and is unquestionably the top tight end prospect in this draft. That does not mean I think they should use their first round pick on him. Having said that, I could be talked into it. Here's how. I'm going to lay this all out because I know if the Bucs end up drafting him, the previous times I've mentioned Sadiq on this show are going to get thrown back in my face. This is all going to boil down to what the Bucs do starting in 10 days. When that open negotiating window begins on March 9th and free agents can start speaking to teams, that's what can change this for me. If the Bucs go out and they get a linebacker, an edge rusher, and then maybe a defensive tackle, that is going to open up their options in the draft. I could also make the argument that if you go and do all of that, I would be even more intrigued by the idea of trading up and ensuring that I land Sonny Styles, because now you have a little bit more draft capital that you can sacrifice in order to make that move. Anyway, it would also depend on what the Mike Evans situation is. I'm going to speak more about the Mike Evans situation tomorrow. Yes, on Saturday. I've gone back. I've listened to the interview that Tom Krasnicki did with his agent, Derek Gilmore, a couple of times. I've talked to some people who have gotten a gauge of what's happening. I have a lot of thoughts on this. I'm going to lay it all out in one episode so that the Mike Evans saga is no longer a nearly daily topic. If there's news worth reporting, we will talk about it on this show, 100%. But I am going to lay out my full thoughts on a completely Mike Evans dedicated episode dropping, on Saturday in regards to what I've heard, my reaction to Derek Gilmore on WDAE, all of it. Anyway, if Mike Evans leaves, I could see Sadiq being a more intriguing option because now all of those targets that would have gone to Mike have been vacated. Ibuka becomes your one, Godwin's your slot, J-Mac is your three, your other outside receiver. Tez is still kind of your situational guy, but then who? Are you going to rely on Shepard again this year? Are you going to look to the later rounds in the draft? Are you going to go get a experienced but inexpensive free agent veteran kind of guy? So that's where Sadiq would kind of slide in. That's where his opportunity really opens up. 6'3", 240. He's bigger than your receivers now. So that does give you another red zone and end zone target that will be able to take advantage of some of those mismatches that you get down in the red zone, the 10 zone, and in those short yardage situations. He's all right as a blocker. I don't think he's anything special, anything to write home about, but to his credit, he talked about knowing that he needs to improve it. He is, he said he's putting in the work, he's studying, he's practicing, he's going through all of that and trying to improve that aspect of his game. That's outstanding. That's the kind of thing that you want to hear. Also has a drop rate of nearly 11%. So I wouldn't classify Sadiq as like some surefire can't miss prospect at the tight end position the way Brock Bowers was. This would still be a pretty significant risk, in my opinion. And I know we're in a position now where it can't be completely ruled out that the Bucs do this, that for the second time in his tenure, Jason Licht uses a first-round pick in the teens on the tight end position. But I'm not going to just sit here and endorse it without knowing what moves are going to be made to improve the defense before we get to the draft. You can't go out there and sign Derek Barnett and Neville Hewitt and Dean Lowry and then draft Sadiq and have me come on this show and praise these moves and say that the Bucs are contenders. Because if that's what they do to address the needs on the defensive side of the ball before drafting a tight end at 15, then it's going to be more of the same as it was last year. The defense isn't going to get stops. The team is not going to be able to win close games. And if they make the playoffs because of the division that they're in, they're going to get bounced in the first round because they don't have a defense that can contend in the postseason. So when I sit here and I say that taking Sadiq, or for that matter, if they were to take Jeremiah Love because somehow he falls to 15, for me to say that taking them would be a mistake, it's purely situational. If they're going into the draft with Levante and Nakobe Dean at linebacker, and you got Mafe at edge, and you brought in DJ Reader to go on the line next to Vita Vea, now we can talk about drafting an offensive player. Now we can talk about that position being open in the first round, because we can talk about Sadiq or Love and God forbid Mike Evans leaves, but you have Jordan Tyson sitting there. And now you can get another top young receiver so that your future, when we're talking 2028, 2029, 2030, you got Ibuka and J-Mac and Tyson as, an incredible trio. That's when you can start to get behind some of these kinds of moves. I will say, regardless of what they do in free agency, I would not draft an offensive lineman in the first round. There will be plenty of depth in this draft for an interior offensive lineman, and I think a lot of people forget how good this line truly was when it was healthy. They were borderline top 5 as a healthy unit in 2024. Yes, you do need more reliable pieces in case someone goes down, so you're not starting practice squad guys. But you don't draft a backup offensive lineman in the first round. You have to take someone that is going to be an instant impact guy. The Bucs can preach depth all they want. You don't take depth in the first round. You take playmakers. You take key pieces of the franchise's future that are going to be here for the long term as integral parts of the team's core. Other than that, they load up on defense and free agency and can go get best player available on either side of the ball. Go for it. Tight end, running back, wide receiver, have a field day out there. I don't care. but you better be in a position where you don't still need multiple starters on the defense if you're going to go that route. Otherwise, it's going to be the very predictable, painful, and disappointing sequel to the 2025 season. That's going to do it for this episode. Please check out everything going on Twitter at Locked On Bucs, at @JYarcho_Bucs, Instagram and TikTok at Locked On Bucs in both of those places. Subscribe on YouTube with the notifications turned on, as well as wherever you get your podcasts. Check out the Everydayer Club and the All Access tier. Click the link in the show notes or go to lockedonbucs.supercast.com. You want to support the show, but you don't want to be in the Everydayer Club? It's real simple. Like this episode on YouTube. Leave a 5-star review wherever you get podcasts. It does help other Buccaneers fans find the show. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding day. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. I want to thank you so much for joining me right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.